I'm Penny and this is my channel. I'm not sure if you guys will remember this, but a while ago in one of my earlier videos where I was talking about not having finished Ocarina of Time, I mentioned that I thought I might like Majora's Mask better than Ocarina of Time based on what I'd played of them so far, and I got a comment on one of those videos about someone who was asking how I could possibly like Majora's Mask better than Ocarina of Time because Ocarina of Time has such an epic final battle and everything. And today I just thought instead of doing a news update, I'd just do a video explaining like how I like Majora's Mask and how it's kind of underappreciated. It's got this real beauty to it, and I just thought I'd talk about that for a while today because I find it interesting, and hopefully you guys will as well. Ahead of time, just so you guys know, I'm not hating on Ocarina of Time at all. I do think it's a fantastic game, but I do think that out of the two, Majora's Mask is definitely the less appreciated. It does have its fan following like within the Zelda and the gamer community, but outside of that, among more casual gamers who aren't as dedicated into the Zelda series, it doesn't seem to get the recognition that I think it should deserve. So Ocarina of Time is a great game, but you do have to admit that sometimes it's a little bit overhyped by fans. It's to be expected because it was the first like three-dimensional Zelda game. It was the first chance people got to explore Hyrule in the dimensions and walk around and see all these beautiful settings and everything. So it's completely to be expected that some players do kind of view it as like the big first Zelda game, and they can't really help that. Like, Majora's Mask couldn't deliver that brand new feeling of exploring the Zelda series for the first time in the three dimensions and everything, but what it couldn't deliver in that new experience, I think it delivered in, like, it did give a new area to explore, and they did give, like, a lot of new game mechanics, and a really beautiful story, a really thought-provoking and emotional story. The main thing that Majora's Mask added to the series was the big 3-day time-traveling limit. Ocarina of Time had time-traveling between the 7 years of young Link and adult Link, and they had day-night progression, but it wasn't really the same as the 3 days in Majora's Mask. In Majora's Mask, you do have the 3 days before the fate of the world, the moon falling and everything, and you have to like repeat those 3 days, so you have to go through the same things over and over. And it is interesting and different, but a lot of Zelda fans didn't really like that. They didn't like being limited to having the 3 days, and then having to reset their progress and losing all this stuff they'd done. But it was interesting, it was very different, and I think I liked it a lot. I thought it was a really interesting mechanic. Like, obviously, through the 3 days, some of the gameplay is saved, or otherwise it'd be, like, impossible to complete. But when you reset the time, you lose, like, your rupees, your item quantities, you lose the player interactions with other players and with other characters in the game, and that's a big part of the Zelda series, the interactions, especially in Majora's Mask. So losing them is a little bit of a, like, frustrating, like, trying to remember what you've done and what you haven't done, but I just think it's part of the interesting time-traveling mechanic. I think one of the most frustrating things people have found about the 3-day limit was that you had to complete the dungeons in the 3 days, which I haven't done, having not completed the game. I haven't finished all the dungeons in 3 days, so I'm not sure exactly how frustrating that is, but I'm guessing it's very frustrating, especially some of the harder ones, like the Great Bay Temple. And I can see why fans wouldn't enjoy that. Like, I think people like having the time to sit down and think about a puzzle in the Zelda series, and Majora's Mask didn't really give you the time to do that, since you were on the clock through the entire dungeon, and if you had to reset time, you'd lose all your progress. There's a little interesting fact about Majora's Mask. The original name for it was Zelda Gaiden, or Zelda Side Story, so it wasn't actually going to be a real installment into the Zelda series until about halfway through production. It also didn't actually start as Majora's Mask. It started as a remake of the 1998 disc drive accessory, but one of the creators complained about having to recreate the same game, so Miyamoto gave him a year, which turned into 18 months, to create Majora's Mask. And in order to make the game in such a small time segment, that's why they implemented the 3-day time system, so they could create a more compact and dense game without having to compromise gameplay or anything. Majora's Mask is sort of the black sheep of the Zelda series. It was the first game to not take place in Hyrule. It takes place in the alternate universe of Termina, which is a cool place. It's different. It uses a lot of the same models and textures as the characters from Ocarina of Time and Hyrule, so people are really viewing it as like their kind of doppelgangers from the alternate dimension. Like the Coco lady from Ocarina of Time uses the same texture and everything as Anju from Clocktown, which is a pretty big character in one of the side stories of the game. So I think it's pretty interesting how it's like the alternate dimension and everything, and that's why it is sort of different and unusual and the black sheep. Majora's Mask really stands out in the series because of its focus on side quests. There's a lot of side quests in the game, and most of them reward you with a mask, and that's kind of required to go, or not required, but it makes the game a lot easier near the end. The side quests are really emotional, and they kind of get you really into the characters, and you want to help them out. There are some ones that stand out, like reuniting Anju and Cafe, and trying to save the Romani Ranch from them on the first night, especially if you've seen what happens in the second day at the ranch, because you know what'll happen if you don't save them on the first night, and that kind of rests on your shoulders, like, you know that'll happen, so you want to try and save them. particularly the Cafe and Anju side quest. It's notable for being one of the longest and hardest side quests in the Zelda series, but it's also really emotional and rewarding if you can do it correctly, because it does have a really beautiful ending, and it is just really nice to go through all that. The hardest part is that if you want to actually get all of the masks in the game, you have to go through the really long, intricate side quest twice, but it's worth it. I think it's a really sweet ending. Another interesting thing about Majora's Mask is you don't really play a hero character. Like, you do, but the characters don't really recognize you as a hero. In Ocarina of Time, people always just kind of spoke to you because you were the hero of time. You were the big guy who was going to save Hyrule. In Termina, you're just this boy who kind of arrived in Clocktown. You're no one, and people don't really understand that you're trying to help them, and sometimes they like reject the chance to save themselves from the moon falling. So it's really interesting to play from a different perspective of not being the big hero character, but at the same time you are, but they don't know it. It's interesting and very different, and I think it's something else that was nice that they explored. Majora's Mask has a much darker theme overall than Ocarina of Time especially, but a lot of other Zelda games. It's got a very kind of more depressing storyline, but it's really emotional and thought-provoking as well. The game kind of ends with a lot of unanswered questions, but I think it's like they're not done to confuse you. They're just done kind of interesting, like what is Termina, what happened to this guy, what happened to that guy. I just think it is another interesting thing about the game. The darker themes are really enhanced by the aesthetics of the game and the music especially, like the Song of Healing, one of the big Ocarina songs in Majora's Mask. The Song of Healing is really beautiful. I'll put a link to it here if you haven't heard it, but I probably have being a Zelda fan. It's a really beautiful song, but also really sad sounding and sweet sounding, but it's kind of like beautiful but tragic, and it's a really nice song that it just kind of sets the theme overall for Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask also just kind of works backwards from the other Zelda games. Like Ocarina of Time I'll use for an example. You progress through the story, and the further you get, more things are thrown at you, more surprises are thrown in. You go through the story pretty, like, in a linear fashion. Here's some stuff happens, more stuff happens, the more things you do, more happen. Majora's Mask leaves you with, at the very start, the moon's gonna fall in 3 days, this is what you have to do, try and fix it. It kind of leaves you with the knowledge that if you don't do anything, these people will die, and it just kind of makes you want to play the game and finish the game to save them, because you know what'll happen if you don't, and I find that interesting as well. I've said interesting like 12 times in this video, but Majora's Mask is a really interesting game. In my opinion, Majora's Mask is just a really fantastic game. It's beautiful, the storyline is fantastic, I love the emotion it really injects into the player. It forces you to care about these characters, it forces you to want to save them all, and it really has a lot of character development for characters that wouldn't get much development in other games. Like in Ocarina of Time, you got a little story for some people, but you don't really get much development. You don't get to know the characters. Majora's Mask really forces you to care about the characters and you want to help them out, and I think it's really fantastic that it was able to do that. It's just a really beautiful game. It really wants you to help the characters out, and you want to save Termina. It's not just like you want to finish the game. You actually want to help the characters, and that's a really beautiful thing. All of that being said, of course, I'll point out again that I haven't actually finished either of these games yet. Very close to finishing Ocarina of Time, not so much Majora's Mask, but I will get to that once I've finished Ocarina of Time. I think that my opinion of the game could change a little once I've experienced the 3-day time system a bit more. Like, the 3-day system in the dungeons is probably going to frustrate the hell out of me, but even if I don't like the game for the gameplay, I'm definitely still going to be able to appreciate the beauty of the game and the emotions of it, and how it really forces you to want to care about the characters and everything. I'm always going to admire that about Majora's Mask, and it's something that the other Zelda games, in my opinion, haven't really been able to do as well as Majora's Mask. I think it's a really beautiful game, a bit different to the others, but it's definitely a game to give a go if you haven't already. Anyway, I think I've talked for long enough about Zelda today. I even wore my Zelda hoodie to show you guys what a fan I was. See? Yeah, you saw it. Close enough. But that's all I'll say for today. A lot about Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. Go play them, they're very fun. I'll leave you with that. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and subscribe to my channel if you aren't subscribed already. Leave a comment if you've got some sort of response. I'm especially interested in how you feel about Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. Leave a video response if that's your thing. I like video responses. And I guess that's it. I'll see you guys later. I'll try to have another video up in the next few days. And till then, bye!